without any fear that plans for the next day would be routine. Before the crack of dawn on that fateful Saturday morning, those 11 humble, innocent, and unsuspecting people never lived to see the sun peering through the eastern horizon as their lives were snuffed out by merciless gunmen. The dreams of those slaughtered ended. The dreams of their surviving families haunted forever. The 5 children and 6 adults who were massacred had nothing to do to incur the wrath of heartless marauders bringing this village into the spotlight for the wrong reasons. Now, a click of a mouse on Google leads to a Wikipedia page on the Lusignan Massacre. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Indian Arrival Committee, the relatives of the victims and the Lusignan and religious communities, I welcome you to this interfaith service in remembrance of those who were slain here in 2008. It has been 5 years since. 2013 also marks the 5th anniversary of the 13 innocent Guyanese who were mowed down in Bartica in a similar manner on Thursday, February 17, 2008. The IAC and all of us are aware of the excruciating pain the surviving relatives continue to experience following the loss of their loved ones as a result of those horrific incidents. While events like these can exacerbate such pain, the IAC believes that the massacres must not be forgotten and allowed to fade into history, as some may wish. On a personal note, with your permission, the Lusignan Massacre can never be forgotten by my family. It happened at a time when we welcomed a newborn. 5 years ago on this day, the 25th of January, after basking in the joy that a newborn brings, I recall just hours after having to leave the hospital for work and subsequently came here with former President Dr. Bharat Jagdeo and his team. We met an entire community in shock and in grief. I can attest that there was nothing happy in Lusignan that day. What transpired was unimaginable. The scent of death and that of fear permeated. Similarly, frustration and anger overflowed. As mentioned, 5 children were killed. As a father, and I'm sure I speak for all parents here, we have experienced the joy that children bring. For those who had their children snatched by cold-hearted gunmen 5 years ago, we can never begin to imagine the pain and unhappiness they feel. For the children who are deprived of their parents, we cannot imagine the emptiness they feel. But despite the anguish of the surviving family members, despite their loss, despite their trauma, despite their agonizing memories of those horrific images, they have remained resolutely a tower of strength. In this regard, the IAC salutes the resilience the relatives have shown in the face of such adversities over the last 5 years and thank them for their cooperation and eagerness in helping to ensure that their loved ones are not forgotten. Indeed, they are exemplary in their grief and have become an inspiration to all who find it challenging to deal with such difficulties. Ladies and gentlemen, I respectfully ask that you stand as we observe a moment of silence in memory of those who were taken that morning. The moment of silence will commence after I would have called the last name. Those slain in Lusignan: Clarence Thomas and his 2 children, Ron and Vanessa; Mohande Gurudat and her 2 sons, Sigobin and Sigo Paul; Ruplal C. Charan, his wife Dhanraji and their granddaughter Rewati Ramsingh; Shazam Mohammed and Shalim Baksh. Those slain in Bartica: Edwin Jilks, Dexter Adrian, Zahir Zakir, Dionarain Singh, Ronald Gomes, Ashraf Khan, Ron Osborne, Errol Thomas, Irving Ferreira, Shane Fredericks, Baldio Singh, Abdul Yassin, and Ashraf Ali Khan.
आज सुनो हम गीत विदा का गा रहे, दो दुखियारे पंछी बिछड़े जा.
The political masters. These men are still among us. They appear on our television, in the newspapers, on the internet, and in public and continue to sow vitriol of racism and hate. They are adept at targeting groups that they believe are vulnerable. Their racist attacks have now focused on Chinese business community. Yet, their political leaders have not condemned this vitriol. This very same silence, an act of collusion that was also seen in the aftermath of January 26th terrorist attack. In fact, some of their spokespeople attempt to portray the people who died here that day not as victims, but as perpetrators. They spread incredible rumors in an attempt to hide their hands. The trauma that survivors endure is not something that is easy to photo. However, we of the PYO are here and will continue to be here to help the community and the people of Lusignan. Know that we will continue to push for a full, true commission so that we can unveil the political leaders behind the January 26th terrorist attack. Yesterday, we celebrated the birth of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who faced prosecution and violence as he was evicted from Mecca and made the hijrah to Medina. Faced with a hateful few and terrorist acts against his people, the Prophet, peace be upon him, continued to fight for equality and justice, an end to bigotry, and an end to bigotry. He called for all people to be their brother's keeper, to protect, and in times of danger, defend their fellow men, women, and children. That race and religion did not matter, but decency and justice will prevail. He did not allow the prosecution and crimes against him to cloud his vision. These are the teachings we will follow and try our best to emulate. We will not forget, but we will heal, and we will grow, and we will become stronger. In keeping the memories of the 11 who died in Lusignan, we must continue to use this fight against bigotry, terrorism, and the politics of hate, and continue to fight in exposing the intellectual authors of this terrorist attack. We must continue to fight against the spreading of lies and hate so that our children can grow up in a better society. And this is the best way to honor our friends and family who lost their lives today. Thank you.
From my right, that person is Shazam Mohammed. I want to invite his brother, who will do a qasida for us.
Thank you very much, Sessional Chairman, Honorable Prime Minister Samuel Hanks, performing duties as President, Honorable Robert Prasad, Regional Chairman, church leaders, religious leaders, my respected elders, relatives of our slain brothers and sisters in humanity, fellow countrymen, a very good evening. I join you here this afternoon, or rather this evening, not out of mere tokenism or just for a photo opportunity or just to mention or for it to be mentioned that I was here, but I do so with all sincerity out of a heart of wanting to continually identify with the people of Lusignan and to remind this nation that a wrong was done in this community that must be remembered, and we must ensure it never happens again. It's scheduled to be debated. I don't know if it will be or it will be deferred again, since it was deferred already. But it is quite interesting to note that in the call for that commission of inquiry, mention is made of the slaying of the persons who were killed here in Lusignan on that dreadful day, where this immoral act took place, which should be condemned by every peace-loving person around the world and every peace-loving Guyanese. But that motion seems to suggest that 2004 and onwards just happened. This country was being fed a diet to plan the funerals and to discuss the way forward. I remember carefully that the sorrowing relative said to me, "We want to have a funeral, or the funerals must be conducted in a manner that is free from racism, divisions. We want the president, we want the leader of the opposition, we want everybody must be able to come. We don't want our relatives to be used to further divide this country." And beloved, while we hail the 11 that were killed, I think it would be my sacred duty to hail the wounded, hurting families of these our beloved Guyanese brothers and sisters who rose to the occasion and rather by responding with hate and bitterness lifted themselves in that very dark hour and wanted to send a message across this nation that despite of our pain and our loss, we want peace and harmony and unity in Guyana, and they must continually be saluted. Beloved, tonight I want to ask all of us as a nation that we should not only pontificate, but we should be sincere. We should not try to highlight and disappear conveniently. If something is wrong, it is wrong. No matter who is behind it, who is involved, and who is suffering or who benefits. A wrong is a wrong.
Seeing my children, one of them, his guts come out. Could remember seeing my husband, my daughter, and the other two survived this was Roberto and Howard Thomas. But today I want to thank God that God have given me the strength that I could go on with this life. And also I want to thank the IAC for doing this, because our families in this community would not forget. Because the 11 person who died here was innocent people, innocent of nothing, because sleeping children, sleeping in their bed, had gone down that night. And I was so terrible the next morning, but God have given me the strength. And I want to thank the IAC for doing this, and the families who are, the rest of the families. I have also, even God have given me the strength that the next morning I could go and walk each of these houses to see the other families. And I just want to say God has strengthened me, and God have given me the strength. And today I could stand here and testify that God is good, because what is going on in this area, nobody could have stand it. And I will just thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I respectfully ask that you stand in recognition of the strength that this lady represents to all of us. Thank you very much. And those of you who recalled her story, she hid behind a curtain, a piece of cloth, as she heard her children and her husband, she heard their dying pains, and she hid behind that curtain to save not only herself, but her other children in this same house here on my right. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Miss Marissa Bonney. I hope I have the last name correct, Miss Marissa Bonney, and she will recite a poem for us.
A crowd that was not necessarily hostile, but was hurt, pain, bleeding internally, in agony and anguish, wanting to do something, wanting to act, wanting to turn the clock back, angry and frustrated with its inability to do anything. A crowd forced to the edge of predictability of what it might do. It was a time to keep faith, and by demonstration and by words to encourage others to keep the faith. It was not an easy time. As I walked through the crowd to the entrance to this housing area, I caught up with a lady, an older lady, lamenting to herself, rather distraught. And she was saying that, and I learned from others, that as was her custom, she had come from Maikoni with her produce to sell at the Lusignan Market, to visit with her daughter and son-in-law and children. But what was she to find? The bad news that they had been killed hours earlier. And she seemed very lost in her own world of grief, repeating to herself about this loss. It is said that he who feels it knows it. But I'd like to assure the people of Lusignan that the loss of their loved ones, that the terror they suffered and they experienced were felt all across the length and breadth of Guyana and even further afar. As was said earlier, a great wrong was done to the innocent, harmless people living in this area. Every right-minded person who heard of or read of the gruesome manner in which these 11 persons were killed was rocked to the core. 5 years later, I doubt that anyone who had lived through that time in Guyana, picking up a newspaper and reading of that incident, would not have been taken aback. And I think they too recall the pain that we felt in Guyana that day. That pain still resonates deep within us. We still grieve with you, the residents of Lusignan and these 5 families in particular. The people of Guyana remember. We cannot forget that senseless loss of life that ripped through Lusignan, seeking to shatter the fabric of our society. For that action, as was said earlier, was certainly intended to drive a wedge between our different peoples. The people of Lusignan in particular were tested, but so were all Guyanese. The faith of all Guyanese in working to become one people, one nation, with a common destiny was severely tested. To those who were injured in the mayhem, but who survived that tragic night of terror, I say, we still have our lives to live. We could not let this incident determine our lives. You are strong enough to survive the physical injuries, and yes, of us all, you suffered the terror the emotional and psychological trauma of those minutes. And for sure, those minutes would have seemed like days or years. But I would join with the religious leaders who may say that you are alive for a purpose. You have your entire lives ahead of you. Live your best lives. Show all of Guyana and the world at large that you can overcome life's greatest adversity and shine. And as we think of those who you lost, I recall our President, Donald Ramatar, who left this morning on our nation's business. He was moved to observe at the Pitri Pak function in October of last year. The best homage we can pay to their memory of those 11 Guyanese is to endeavor to ensure that this never happens again. My friends, Lusignan was intended to and did test the fabric of our young nation. And we are a young nation, descendants as we are, from 4 parents, from different distant lands, each with its own language, its own religion, its own rhythm and culture, its own history and way of seeing things, thrown together here to establish and run sugar estates, thrown together in ways which introduce much additional conflict in our meeting. The less than 200 years that we have been together here is but a short time still in historical terms. There are nations who have been together for thousands of years where divisions and tensions are still aplenty. So there is potential in our society, potential which is exploited at times from heaping abuse on them, and I think even striking, assaulting some of them. But that morning there was understanding all around, and the situation held, even if barely so. As I was in the crowd too, and as I said, a crowd like that in great torment on not knowing what to do and not what it would do. A man I knew from this village, a minibus man, took me to stand by his bus and some other vehicles so that we had something at our backs, offering some kind of protection. And I became alert to what he said, that in all that was happening at the time, and there was much happening, he still provided service to people he knew in Buxton. And some of his villagers had questioned him why he should still be looking to serve those people. But he had been saying that the majority of people there were people like us, trying to make a living, trying to get by. And I was alert again some nights later at the Thomas residence, just down there, when all that could be said, having been said over those days, I looked around and see what I could say more, and I asked Mrs. Thomas, how did the young lady from Maikoni get to meet the young man from Wakapaw? I put the question in terms of distance, region 5, I think, and region 2. But we would be conscious, along with that, there would be the crossing not only of distance or the meeting across distance, but also the meeting across race, religion, history, culture. I was relieved, and I would say rewarded, by a brightening smile as Mrs. Thomas related how they met. And I was really rewarded because she spoke of it as if it was a natural thing. They had been working at some place and they met and spoke. Like Guyanese, like we hope in time would not be remarkable as Guyanese young people meet and see and hope for good in each other. Lusignan, Bartica, and the other places have put us to test. We have survived those tests. We are challenged to keep moving forward. We must allow ourselves to heal. As was said more eloquently than I could earlier, it is only natural that we humans, at times like the Lusignan Massacre, those of us who suffered wrong then, could be filled with revenge and retribution. It is only natural. But as all our religions say, revenge and retribution do not bring healing. There must be justice. There must be justice. But justice does not need revenge and retribution. It does, from our experiences, require that there be acknowledgement of wrongs that were done, no matter how heinous, and there must be the hope that those who have been wronged would find it in their hearts that they could put aside retribution, that they may be able to find that they can let it be, even though they will always remember. But hopefully the pain would be lessened. As was said earlier, the leader of the opposition had introduced a motion in Parliament calling for the president to put in place a commission to look at incidents, Lusignan and other, during this particular time. And from where we sit in the People's Progressive Party civic government, and reading in the details of that motion as put, we have wondered about the purpose and intent of the motion as he has put it. So that the